Welcome to the first video on the second set of Aristotle readings. This set of videos is going to be about physics, book 1, chapter 7. So physics, book 1, chapter 7, or just 1, 7. Okay. And in physics, book 1, chapter 7, we get Aristotle's account of change. So remember, the subject of natural philosophy is change. And the fundamental question is, how is change possible? And just like how in thinking about Aristotle's account of substances and properties in the categories, I wanted you to be thinking about how that relates back to the Phaedo and Plato's account of substances and properties. And I'm gonna talk to you about that. I'm gonna ask you about that next time we meet. I also want you to be thinking about how this account of change that Aristotle is giving builds on the account of change that we saw in the Phaedo. So, okay, so we've got our question, how is change possible? And the way that Aristotle is gonna examine this question is through his kind of metaphysical grammar, where he's going to begin with statements about change, like red becomes green, or the non-musical becomes musical, or a St. Louisian becomes a Carolinian, or a St. Louisian becomes a musician, right? So these are all examples of statements that express a change. And you should note here, I mean, it's going to be helpful to remember in what follows that there's no definite or indefinite article in Greek. So Greek doesn't have a word like a or an, right? That's the indefinite article. And it also doesn't have a word like the, which is the definite article. So, so in Greek, you just have non-musical becomes musical, or red becomes green, or St. Louisian becomes Carolinian. And that wouldn't sound weird, right? That would sound completely normal in Greek, because they just don't, it doesn't have the definite, indefinite article distinction in the way that we do. So a human being or the human being would just be human being. And so we'd have statements like cold comes to be hot, and there's sort of an implicit thing in this, right? So it's understood that it's a cold thing that becomes a hot thing. Cold comes to be hot. That could be understood as cold thing comes to be hot thing, but that wouldn't sound weird in Greek. So change is a coming to be, right? It's acquiring a property usually. And that presupposes a plurality of things, i.e. a many. So it presupposes a solution to the paradox of the one and the many. And the kind of statements that we're going to be examining, there's sort of two of them. So one's going to be of the form A comes to be B, red comes to be green, or St. Louisian comes to be a Carolinian, where we're starting one way and we're ending up another way. Statements about change are not usually of the form A comes to B, full stop, right? A just comes into existence. But sometimes we do get those kinds of statements. So, you know, we could say Sally comes to be. And then we would be saying what? Well, we'd be saying Sally is born, right? Sally is born. That's what it means to say Sally comes to be. We'll come back to these kind of statements later on. So, but we're going to start with these guys. A comes to be B. And just like how the paradox of the one and the many sort of gets Aristotle going with properties and substances, with accidents and substances, the paradox of change is what gets Aristotle going with change. So at 191A30, Aristotle says, what is cannot come to be, since it is already. And nothing can come to be out of what is not, since there must be something underlying. So what is cannot come to be, since it is already, and nothing can come to be out of what is not, since there must be something underlying. So the problem, the paradox, right, is, well, we've got what is, and that can't change, that can't come to be, since it is already, and nothing can come to be out of what is not, right? So we can't have something coming to be out of what isn't. And so how is change possible? How can we have change at all, given that what is can't come to be and what is not can't come to be, right? So that's the paradox of change, and Aristotle wants to give a solution to this paradox. And you might be thinking, oh, well, that's easy. B just pops into existence and A pops out of existence, right? That'd be an obvious solution. So green pops into existence and red pops out of existence. Well, in the ancient world, that was thought not to be a satisfying answer, and we can see why, right? I mean, you don't usually think of things just popping into existence and other things popping out of existence. No, one thing becomes another thing. Green becomes red, or the St. Louisian becomes a Carolinian. And it's not that the St. Louisian pops out of existence and the Carolinian pops into existence. No, the St. Louisian becomes the Carolinian comes to be out of the St. Louisian, right? And so there's this presiding thought in ancient philosophy that we can't just have things popping into and out of existence. We can't just have creation ad nihilo, or from nothing, or out of nothing, right? And so in order to give a satisfying, not paradoxical account of change, we need to have an account of change without A and B popping in and out of existence. And so in order to do that, we're going to have to give an account that can account both for the novelty in change and the continuity in the change. So how A stays the same, its continuity, and how it changes, its novelty. So we want to see how the same thing can both be the same and new in the change. And so that's what we're going to need to do if we want to give an account of change. And you can see how if you are pre-Socratic and you didn't have a solution to the paradox of the one and the many, well, then you'd be out of luck, right? Because there would either be many things, the non-musician and then the musician, or there'd just be one thing that's both non-musical and musical. And neither way would you have a satisfying account of change, because you wouldn't be able to account for the novelty, or on the one hand, and you wouldn't be able to account for the continuity on the other, right? And so it's the solution to the paradox of the one and the many that makes it possible for Aristotle to give an account of change. So we'll turn to that account in the next video.